I always believed the worst thing that could happen before a wedding was cold feet, the kind that made someone hesitate at the altar or suddenly question forever. By the time I made it up the stairs to my sister's at Tunnelfing, my fiancé's phone lit up on the kitchen counter and a message appeared that shattered the life I thought I was about to step into. And even now, I remember how normal everything had felt just minutes before. The quiet apartment filled with the smell of pasta sauce simmering on the stove, the faint hum of traffic outside, the ring on my finger catching the light every time I moved my hand, a ring that had seemed like the beginning of something perfect but suddenly felt heavy with questions I hadn't known to ask. Ethan and I had been engaged for 7 months, together for almost 4 years, and our lives had begun to merge in that slow, comforting way couples talk about as if it's the natural order of things. We shared groceries and streaming passwords and weekend routines. We argued about which couch to buy for the house we planned to move into after the wedding. We talked about children in vague someday terms that felt both distant and inevitable. And if anyone had asked me the week before whether I trusted him completely, I would have answered without hesitation, because trust had always felt easy with Ethan, as natural as breathing. That night, he had stepped out to pick up wine from the store 2 blocks away, leaving his phone charging near the sink, and I wasn't snooping or searching for anything when the message appeared, just wiping down the counter while humming quietly to myself. But the screen lit up, and instinct pulled my eyes toward it, and I saw a name I recognized immediately. Claire. Claire was engaged to Ethan's best friend, Lucas, and we had all spent countless evenings together, double dates that stretched late into the night, sharing stories and laughter and plans for the 2 weddings we joked might happen only months apart. And if someone had told me then that the message lighting up Ethan's phone would change everything between the 4 of us, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it. The message preview was short but impossible to misunderstand, only 5 words glowing against the dark screen. Does she know the truth yet? I stood there staring at it for several seconds, long enough for the screen to fade back to black, but the words didn't disappear with it. They stayed in my mind, sharp and unsettling, and at first I tried to explain them away, telling myself it had to be about something harmless, maybe a surprise party or some private joke between friends, but the uneasy feeling in my chest refused to settle. I shouldn't have picked up the phone. At least that's what a calmer, more trusting version of me might say now, but curiosity mixed with a strange sense of dread made the decision for me, and before I could second-guess myself, I tapped the screen, entered the passcode I knew by heart, and opened the conversation thread between Ethan and Claire. What I found there didn't make sense at first, because it wasn't what I expected. There were no romantic messages or flirtation, no obvious betrayal that would instantly confirm my worst fears. But there were fragments of conversation stretching back months, careful, tense exchanges that sounded like 2 people circling around something they didn't quite want to say out loud, references to meetings they had never mentioned to Lucas or me, references to documents and dates, and a phrase that appeared again and again like a warning neither of them could ignore. Before the weddings. I read the messages twice, then a third time, my heart beating harder with each line. And the more I read, the clearer it became that Ethan and Claire had been sharing a secret for a long time, a secret that somehow involved both Lucas and me, and yet neither of us had been told. By the time Ethan returned with the wine 20 minutes later, I had already put the phone back exactly where it had been. The screen dark and innocent, but nothing about me felt the same anymore, because once you realize someone you trust is hiding something, every normal moment becomes suspicious. Every smile feels like a mask. He kissed my cheek when he walked in, the way he always did, and asked if the pasta was ready, and I remember looking at him and wondering how well I truly knew the man I was about to marry, wondering what kind of truth could make my fiancé secretly message another man's fiancé for months, wondering why they were both so afraid of us finding out before the weddings. I didn't confront him that night, not because I didn't want answers, but because something told me the truth was bigger than a single conversation, bigger than a single lie. And if Ethan and Claire had been hiding it this carefully, then whatever secret they were protecting had the power to change all 4 of our lives. What I didn't realize then was just how much it would change them, or that the truth waiting beneath those messages would eventually lead to the most unexpected decision any of us would make, a decision no one could have predicted. The night I first saw those 5 simple words glowing on a phone screen. Does she know the truth yet? I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a moment. Because once doubt enters your mind, it spreads into every memory you thought was certain. And I lay awake beside Ethan listening to his steady breathing while replaying every moment from the past year, every conversation with Claire, every laugh Lucas shared with Ethan, searching for something I had missed, Some sign that the four of us had been living inside a story far more complicated than the one we believed. Morning arrived slowly through the pale light filtering between the curtains, and Ethan woke cheerful and relaxed, stretching his arms and asking if I wanted coffee, as if nothing in the world had shifted overnight, and I realized with a strange mix of sadness and determination that he had no idea I had seen the message. For the first time since we met, I was keeping something from him, and the realization felt both uncomfortable and strangely empowering. All day at work, I tried to focus on spreadsheets and emails, but my mind kept drifting back to the message thread on his phone, to the repeated phrase, "before the weddings," and the quiet urgency hidden in Claire's words. And by mid-afternoon, I understood that there was only one person who could give me answers, without immediately alerting Ethan. I texted Claire a simple message asking if she wanted to grab coffee that evening, something we had done dozens of times before, and when she replied almost immediately with a yes in a location halfway between our offices, my heart began beating faster with the uneasy certainty that she already suspected something had changed. The cafe was small and warm, the kind of place filled with soft music and the scent of roasted beans, and when I arrived, Claire was already sitting near the window, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug she hadn't touched. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and in that moment, I realized she looked just as tired as I felt, as if she had also spent the night fighting thoughts she couldn't escape. We talked about ordinary things at first, work deadlines, wedding planning, the ridiculous cost of flowers, but the conversation felt like a fragile stage set built around the real topic waiting between us, and eventually, the silence stretched long enough that I knew neither of us could pretend any longer. I leaned forward and said quietly, "I saw the message on Ethan's phone." The color drained from her face so quickly it almost frightened me, and for several seconds she didn't speak, just stared at the table as if deciding whether the truth was worth the damage it would cause. When she finally looked up, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Then you know something is wrong?" I nodded slowly. "I know you and Ethan have been hiding something from Lucas and me for months." Claire closed her eyes briefly, like someone bracing for impact, and when she opened them again, there was a mixture of guilt and relief in her expression, the look of someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for too long. "We never wanted to keep it from you," she said quietly, "but we didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything." My chest tightened at those words, because when someone says something might destroy everything, it usually does. "Tell me what?" I asked. She hesitated only a moment before answering, and when she did, her voice trembled with the weight of it. 3 months ago, Ethan and I found something by accident, something about Lucas. The name landed heavily between us, and my confusion deepened. "Lucas?" She nodded slowly. "He's been lying to both of us." I stared at her, trying to understand how that could possibly involve Ethan as well. "About what?" Claire swallowed before answering. "About who he really is, and why he started dating me in the first place." My mind raced through possibilities, none of them making sense, and the silence stretched until I finally whispered, "Claire, just tell me." She leaned closer across the small table, lowering her voice so no one around us could hear. "Lucas didn't meet me by chance 2 years ago," she said. "He had been looking for me." My confusion must have shown on my face, because she continued quickly, the words spilling out now that the secret had begun to break open. "And the worst part is, Ethan realized he'd been looking for you too." The world seemed to tilt slightly as I tried to process what she was saying. Why would Lucas be looking for me? Claire's answer came slowly, carefully, as if she still couldn't believe it herself. "Because you and Lucas share the same father." The cafe suddenly felt too quiet, too small to contain the shock that rushed through me, and for a moment I couldn't speak at all, couldn't even breathe properly, as the meaning of her words began to settle in. "That's impossible," I finally said. "I would know if I had a brother." Claire shook her head gently. "You don't know because your father had another family before you were born, and Lucas found out 2 years ago." My hands began to tremble around my coffee cup as the pieces started forming a picture I had never imagined. "So Lucas knew?" I whispered. "From the beginning?" Claire nodded again, her expression filled with something close to anger now. "He knew, and he still pursued me knowing that Ethan was your fiancé." I felt a strange mix of disbelief and dread building inside me. Why would he do that? Claire looked down at the table before answering, her voice heavy with realization. "Because he wanted to get close to you." The words hung in the air between us, unsettling and incomplete. And I realized the truth she was revealing was only the beginning of something much larger, something that had quietly entangled all four of us long before we ever planned our weddings. What neither of us expected, sitting there in that quiet cafe sharing the first pieces of the secret, was that by the time the truth fully surfaced, it wouldn't just destroy the relationships we thought we had, it would rearrange them entirely. For several minutes after Claire told me the truth, I couldn't speak at all, because the idea that Lucas, the man who laughed too loudly at Ethan's terrible jokes and brought expensive wine to every dinner, might actually be my half-brother, felt so absurd that my mind kept rejecting it. But Claire watched me quietly, patiently, as if she understood that some truths take time to settle into the body before they make sense to the brain. Finally, I whispered the only thing that seemed possible. "How do you know this?" Claire reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, unlocking it slowly before sliding it across the table toward me. On the screen was a scanned document, an old birth certificate with a familiar last name printed in the space marked "Father." My last name. My heart began pounding as I stared at it, and Claire explained in a low voice that Ethan had discovered the document by accident while helping Lucas move apartments 3 months earlier, that Lucas had panicked when Ethan asked about it, and that the story had eventually spilled out in fragments that made everything suddenly complicated and dangerous for all of us. According to what Lucas admitted, he had discovered the truth about his father during a legal issue involving inheritance after his mother died, and when he tracked down the name connected to that old record, he eventually found me through social media and realized I was already engaged to his best friend. Instead of revealing the truth immediately, he decided to get close first, convincing himself he needed to understand who I was before turning our lives upside down with a revelation none of us were prepared for. But that explanation didn't answer the question twisting inside me now, the one Claire had already begun to suspect. If he only wanted to meet me, I said slowly, why did he start dating you? Claire's expression darkened slightly, the kind of look someone has when they already know the answer but hate it anyway, because he thought it would keep him close to Ethan and close to you. A wave of anger rose inside me then, sharp and immediate. Because whatever complicated emotions Lucas might have felt about discovering a hidden sister, manipulating another person's feelings was not something that could be explained away so easily. Claire must have sensed the same thing, because she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "The worst part is that Ethan confronted him months ago," she said. "He told Lucas that keeping the truth secret wasn't fair to you." My head snapped up. Then why didn't Ethan tell me? Claire's eyes softened with something close to sympathy. Because Lucas begged him not to. The words hung between us like a heavy curtain. Lucas said if the truth came out suddenly, it would destroy both weddings and possibly our friendships, and he promised Ethan he would find the right moment to explain everything himself. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. And Ethan believed him? Claire gave a small, humorless shrug. At first, but weeks kept passing, and Lucas never said anything. My mind replayed every recent gathering the four of us had shared, every dinner where Lucas had raised a glass in celebration of our future marriages, while secretly carrying a truth that could shatter them. The deception suddenly felt enormous. "So Ethan and you started talking about it," I realized. Claire nodded. "We didn't know what to do. If we told you, and Lucas found out we'd exposed it behind his back, it could explode in ways none of us could control. But keeping it secret felt wrong too." I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the tangled web the four of us had somehow built without realizing it. "That's why you texted Ethan last night," I said quietly. Claire nodded again. "Lucas told me yesterday that he planned to tell you everything this weekend." My stomach tightened. Why this weekend? Claire hesitated, and I suddenly understood before she even spoke. Because that's when he planned to call off the wedding? The cafe seemed to shrink around us as the implications settled into place. Lucas had been preparing to reveal the truth about our shared father and end his engagement to Claire at the same time. A confession that would not only collapse their relationship but send shockwaves through mine as well. I rubbed my temple slowly, trying to process everything at once. "So Ethan knew this was coming," I said. Claire nodded. "He was planning to tell you first, before Lucas could." A strange silence followed her words, and for the first time since this conversation began, we both noticed something else hidden beneath the chaos of the situation. Ethan and Claire had spent months discussing secrets, meeting privately, worrying about the same problem together while the rest of us remained unaware. Claire must have noticed the same realization forming in my expression because she gave a small, uneasy smile. "Funny, isn't it?" she said softly. "The two people trying to protect everyone else were the ones forced to spend the most time together." I didn't answer right away, But an unexpected thought crossed my mind then, one that felt strange and slightly dangerous even to consider. Over the past few months, Ethan had grown more distant with me, distracted and tense in ways I couldn't explain, and Claire had seemed similarly uncertain around Lucas. At the time, I had blamed wedding stress, the natural pressure of approaching a huge life change. But now I wondered if something else had been happening beneath the surface, while all four of us tried to manage a secret too complicated for any of us to handle alone. Claire must have been thinking along similar lines, because she looked at me carefully before asking a quiet question. "Can I ask you something honestly?" I nodded. She hesitated before speaking. "Have you noticed Ethan changing lately?" I thought about the past few months, about the distracted conversations and late-night phone calls that now made sense in a completely different way. Slowly, I nodded. Claire sighed softly and looked down at her coffee again. "Lucas has changed too," she admitted. "And the more I think about it, the more I wonder if the secret wasn't the only thing pulling everything apart." Outside the cafe window, the evening sky had begun turning dark, the streetlights flickering on one by one as the city moved through its ordinary routines. But inside that small table by the glass, it felt like an entire future had just shifted direction. We had started the evening believing we were uncovering a hidden family connection, something shocking, but manageable as handled carefully. Instead, we were beginning to realize that the truth might do more than cancel one wedding. It might end both of them, and lead us somewhere none of us had expected. The confrontation happened 2 nights later in Ethan's apartment, the same place where the four of us had celebrated birthdays, shared dinners, and toasted to the futures we thought were certain. And the strange thing was how normal everything looked when we arrived. The same couch, the same framed photos on the wall, the same quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Yet the air between us felt completely different, because every person in that room now carried a truth that had finally reached the surface. Lucas stood near the window with his arms folded, his expression tense in a way I had never seen before, while Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, watching him carefully, and Claire stood beside me with her hand lightly gripping my wrist as if we were both bracing for something that could not be undone once it started. For a long moment, no one spoke, and then Lucas exhaled slowly and said the words that confirmed everything. "I guess Ethan already told you." I shook my head gently. Claire did. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument, because now there was no illusion left to protect. Lucas ran a hand through his hair and looked directly at me, and for the first time since I had known him, the confident charm he usually carried was gone, replaced by something far more uncertain. "I never planned for things to get this complicated," he said quietly. I felt anger stir inside me again, but it was different now, calmer and steadier. "You had 2 years to tell me the truth," I replied. 2 years to say you were my brother." Lucas winced slightly at the word, and the reaction didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Ethan straightened from the counter, his voice suddenly sharper. "That's exactly the problem," he said. Lucas looked at him, and for a moment, the tension between them revealed something deeper than the secret we already knew. "Go ahead," Lucas muttered. "Say it." Ethan didn't hesitate. "The DNA test proved you're not actually related to her." The room went completely still, the sentence echoing in my mind like a sudden crack in the ground beneath my feet. I turned to Lucas slowly. "What?" Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, as if he had been hoping Ethan wouldn't say it out loud. "The document I found suggested it," he admitted quietly. "But when Ethan pushed me to be sure, we ran a test." My heart pounded as the truth unfolded in front of me piece by piece. And Lucas finally met my eyes again. "We share the same father's name, but not the same DNA." Confusion rushed through me, tangled with disbelief. "So we're not related at all?" Lucas nodded once, slowly. "No." Claire let out a quiet breath beside me, the tension in her shoulders releasing slightly, but the relief was quickly replaced by another realization that seemed to ripple through the room at the same time. I looked at Lucas again, trying to understand. "Then why keep pretending we might be siblings?" Lucas hesitated, and for the first time, he looked genuinely ashamed. "Because by the time we got the test results," he said quietly, "everything had already gotten complicated." Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. That's one way to describe it. My eyes moved between them, sensing another truth hiding behind the one we had just uncovered. "Complicated how?" Ethan glanced briefly at Claire before answering, and the look that passed between them was small but impossible to ignore. "Because while Lucas and I were arguing about whether to tell you," Ethan said slowly, "Claire and I were the only two people trying to fix the situation." Claire looked down at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was going. But the realization had already begun forming in my mind. Months of secret meetings, late night messages, shared worries. I turned to her gently. Did something happen between you two? Claire hesitated only a second before nodding. Not at first, she said quietly. But when you spend months talking to someone about a problem that's changing both your lives, things shift. Lucas let out a bitter sigh and leaned back against the wall. And while they were figuring out their feelings, he said dryly, "You and I were drifting further apart anyway." I looked at him, realizing he was right. The relationship we once had now felt distant and unfamiliar, like a version of my life that had quietly faded without me noticing. For several seconds, none of us spoke, and then something unexpected happened. Claire looked at me and laughed softly, not out of joy but out of disbelief at the strange path that had led us here. 2 weddings planned, she said. And somehow every single engagement ended up wrong. Ethan stepped closer then, his voice calmer than it had been all evening. Maybe they weren't wrong, he said. Just misplaced. Lucas raised an eyebrow. That's a polite way to say we all picked the wrong people. I looked at Ethan, noticing how natural it suddenly felt standing beside him without the weight of confusion between us. And I saw the same quiet realization reflected in Claire's expression as she glanced toward Lucas. The truth had unraveled everything we thought we knew about our relationships, but strangely, it had also clarified something else that had been quietly forming beneath the surface for months. Claire spoke first, her voice thoughtful. Maybe the secret wasn't what broke everything. Lucas nodded slowly, almost amused by the irony. Maybe it just revealed what was already changing. I looked around the room then, at the 4 of us who had once believed we were walking toward 2 perfect weddings, and instead had ended up facing a completely different future together. And the strange thing was that it no longer felt like a disaster. It felt like honesty. Months later, there were still 2 weddings after all, just not the ones anyone had originally planned. Claire and Lucas stood laughing together beneath a summer sky, the relationship rebuilt slowly and honestly once the lies were gone, while Ethan waited for me at the end of the aisle with the same quiet smile that had once made me trust him without question. The difference now was that our story had already survived the truth, and somehow, that made it stronger than the future we had imagined before we knew it.